R. Venkatachalapathy to my left is the Indian historian I most admire. And I've chosen my words carefully. It may seem a rather bold statement, a daring statement, a declamatory statement, but you know I'm known to make controversial remarks, and I shall defend this. First, of course, is the extraordinary range of his work, which covers political history, economic history, social history, literary history, intellectual history, publishing history. The second is his immersement in primary sources. The third is his remarkable facility with more than one language. Indian intellectuals, Indian writers, Indian scholars, Indian literary figures, poets, novelists, historians, sociologists, economists, generally write in English or in their mother tongue. And Chalapathy is one of very few Indian scholars, they can be counted on the fingers of one hand, who have a formidable body of work in their mother tongue, in his case Tamil, and of course in English. Now, then there is his devotion to his craft. Not only is he a brilliant researcher, a rigorous scholar, possessed of a sharp analytical mind, it's also the commitment to his craft. Chalapathy is what I call a historian's historian. I first met him in the archives, which is the place you would like to meet an historian, not on Twitter or Facebook or even in a literary festival. Right. So I think there was an event to mark his 50th birthday, to tell you the standing of Chalapathy. Now, there are many lovers of Tamil literature and scholarship here, to which this is not any news. But there will be others who are deracinated English-speaking intellectuals and readers like me, who may not know the quality and caliber of the person to my left. And just as an example of the kind of scholar he is, you know, when historians grow old, when scholars grow old, when they come to 60 or 70 or 75, there's something called a festschrift, where their students and admirers hold a meeting for them, where they present, you know, essays in tribute to Chalapathy. Chalapathy is the only, so far as I know, the only scholar anywhere in the world who had a festschrift for him, a conference held in his honor when he was merely 50. It was organized in the Allah Library, and there were hundreds of people. There were as many people there as in this room, and from a very different class profile than the people in this room. There had been students, there had been class, there had been railway babus, people who had read him and admired him in Tamil, not just people from Chennai, but people from Tirunelveli, from Namakkal, from Salem. And here was this young lad. I'm 10 years older than him, that's all. But Gopal Gandhi, who was 25 years older than him, was there paying tribute to him. So the people paying tribute to him included me. I'm 10 years older than him. Gopal Gandhi is 25 years older than him. T.M. Krishna is 50 times more famous than him. And there he was. We were all lined up. And when the invitation came, we have to speak in Chalapathy's honor. We were all there. Because of this extraordinary wide range of abilities and qualities he bears to his work. Now, I have played a very modest role in Chalapathy's literary career, and I should claim credit for that. In that, I nudged him first about 10 or 12 years ago to remember that unlike some of us, he had literary facility in 2 languages. And there was no reason why he could not write in English as well as write in Tamil. I think he has written how many books in Tamil, Chalapathy? 20, including your edited books? 40 books in Tamil. But it's not the quantity. It includes, of course, major works of historical scholarship, including on V.A. Chidambaram Pillai, but also a magnificent 6-volume edition of the writings of the great Tamil writer Pudumai Pittan. The discovery of Bharati's cartoons, you know, and many, many other rich contributions to Tamil literary and historical scholarship. He's also been deeply involved in the translations, including of Sundar Ramaswamy's great novel, J.J. Uh, his editorial work with young writers, nurturing them. And this is, in English as far as I know, this is his 6th book. The first book was his PhD thesis, which is a history of the book in Tamil Nadu, the history of publishing books in the Tamil language. Then there were 2 delightful collections of essays, one bearing the title, In Those Days There Was No Coffee. The other collection of biographical portraits called Tamil Characters. Then a delightful, insightful, and very perceptive book on the battles over copyright when it came to the writings of Subramanya Bharati. And a book, his most recent book in English before this one, I think bears the title, A Short History of a Very Big Book, which is a history of the Tamil Encyclopedia. Now, this biography of Chidambaram Pillai, I don't read Tamil, so I can't comment on the entire corpus of his work, is absolutely his best book yet. It's because of the range of subjects it tackles. You know, it's also, by the way, the product of a 40-year obsession. You know, historians have obsessions. Chalapathy is a devoted family man. If you think that he has no time for his wife and his child, you are mistaken. Yesterday, there was a party to thrown by Dr. Nirmala Lakshman to mark the opening of the festival, and all of us were there, except Chalapathy, because it was his daughter's birthday, and he knew where his priorities lay. But apart from all of that, you know, the kind of the first love of his life, not the deepest love of his life. The deepest love of his life may be his wife and his daughter. The first love of his life was V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, who he discovered at the age of 16 while working in a library. Now, I'm slightly envious of that, of the depth of his engagement with Chidambaram Pillai, because I also have the first love of my life predates my wife and my 2 children. This is a man called Verrier Elvin, whom I discovered when I was 20. When I was a failing cricketer and a failing economist, and I discovered this maverick anthropologist, and I spent 20 years writing about him. And I was slightly envious that the depth and intensity of Chalapathy's singular passion for V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, in terms of years, which is how historians measure these things, is twice as long as mine. Now, with this book, which he will tell you about, he's also ventured into new domains. As I said, he has shown himself to be a commanding scholar of literary history, of cultural history, of social history. He's now ventured into economic history, which is very daring, and it's a terrain he hasn't really got into so far, and maybe that may be something I would like to hear about. I mean, it's also, though the passion is long-lasting, the form it's taken through this book is new in terms of structure, argument, theme. So, Chalapathy, we'd love to hear more about your book.
Vanakkam. The biggest praise that you can get is from your peers. So I'm delighted, and of course you are known to be very, very generous. But I do have to acknowledge 2 things. First is, Ram Guha enabled the writing of popular history in India. If Midnight's Children, Salman Rushdie made Indian writing in English possible to us in a certain manner of saying. Similarly, Ram Guha created a market for popular history, by which I mean not reading WhatsApp messages and writing about any damn subject under the sky. Professionally competent history addressed to a larger audience. So this has been very enabling. I think it begins with very relevant, even though it was published by an academic publisher. The second is, I owe something to you. You mentioned this in your preamble, but this was not 10 or 12 years ago. It was something like 22 years ago. You gave me 2 pieces of advice. First piece of advice I didn't follow, and if anybody is here, please don't follow that advice. He said, read less. Okay, I don't know why he told me this. We were walking out of Landmark, and probably he saw me, gawking at these books. So he said, read less. I have not followed that advice. But he did tell me that, please write more in English. Until that time, I did my professional writing in English, and I always wrote what I thought was politically important, culturally important in Tamil, in a more accessible style. So it took me a while to follow your advice, but I think I have followed it. It's for you to judge now. So I'm actually delighted to be speaking about Chidambaram Pillai because he's a boyhood hero for me. I fell in love with him when I was 14 years old, and I must thank the CBSE textbooks for that. Because there was no mention of V.O. Chidambaram Pillai in the history textbooks. That is precisely why I got interested in him. To people in Tamil Nadu, Chidambaram Pillai is a hero, Vausi is a hero. 2 metaphors would come to their mind the moment they mention Vausi. The Kappal and the Sekku. The ship, the shipping company that he ran, and the Sekku, the oil mill that he pulled. So this complete lack of reference to him in the textbooks, the absolute ignorance and indifference and apathy that North India has towards South Indian culture and history and political contributions really, really jarred. And that's how I started. So by that time, I'm a great lover of biographies. I love biographies because I was a puny fellow with a snotty nose. So I was looking for heroes. So one of my first heroes was Baden Powell, the scouting, father of scouting movement. So when I read biographies of major Western figures, and then you come to Indian figures, you find that there is nothing. So the British Council Library used to be there. I used to read all these books. You had, for instance, the letters of Shelley and Keats, the lovely letters that Keats wrote to Fanny Brawne and others, or to his girlfriend, Fanny Brawne. But you find, while there are hundreds of letters written which have been retrieved from 200 and 300 years ago, but for somebody like, Subramanya Bharati, it was the centenary of Bharati, which is, for me, a landmark, 81 to 82. Remember, a slim volume of Bharati's letters had been published by the scholar R.A. Padmanabhan. There were just 21 letters in that book, while the letters of Shelley and Keats were such huge volumes. Similarly, the biography of Baden Powell is so rich. Why don't we have such biographies? So I set about to do it. I looked at biography, so I said I should write it. So I started collecting material when I was 14. The reason I underline this is because some of the material that I saw 40 years ago don't exist anymore. The second picture that you will see very soon of a ship, I'll come back to it now. So Vausi is known in Tamil Nadu. He is known as Kapaloti Tamilan. We should thank 2 people for the lasting fame of Vausi. One is Mapo Sivanganam, who wrote a biography of Bharati, of Vausi in 1944, and his entire life he spent singing the praise of Vausi, Kattabomman and Vallalar. So even though Maposi wrote a a terrible review of my first book. He was 80 years old then and I was 16 years old, but somehow he thought I was his competitor. So he wrote a very bad review, but I forgive him for it. Because he went from street to street, town to town, singing the praise of Vausi, even though he didn't belong to his caste. These days, it is very easy to find the caste of anyone. You want to find out what Ram Guha's caste is, you find out what is his research topic, as a general statement. Immediately you can find out what is that person's caste. So this man did not belong to the caste of Kattabomman or Vausi or Vallalar. The second person to whom we owe this is B.R. Pantulu, who made a film called Kapaloti Tamilan. 1961, the film was a spectacular flop, but it was a critical success. That film, made a lasting impact on so many people. These two people have to be mentioned, and we owe our gratitude to these two people. But the existing biographies were all sketchy. As I said, unknown outside Tamil Nadu. And whatever came to be written about him, there was more of myth, more of misinformation, more of fanciful constructions than reality. Now, why I object to this is because the facts about Vausi is even more incredible than the myths about him. I can give you a whole list of them. Just imagine a small town pleader. He was not even a lawyer. He was not a BABL. He finished his matriculation and passed a pleadership examination and was practicing in Tuticorin. Sudden one fine day, he is starting a shipping company, registering a joint stock company. And not only that, he ends up buying 2 ships. How do you buy a ship? Do you go to a supermarket and pick it off the shelf? Can you order a ship on ships on Amazon? How do you do this in 1906? This man did it. How did he do it? It took me 100 years. It took me education. It took me going to this anti-national institution of JNU to study, to understand the mechanics of what is maritime history, what is economic nationalism. But you find that, whatever existing works were all, wrong. Even in this wonderful film, people would think that Kapaloti Tamilan film is a melodramatic film. Actually, it is not. I would say it is a realist film because his life is melodramatic. I'll come to it shortly. But the mistakes in that film, he bought 2 ships. Forget what price he bought for. We don't know the price for which he bought it or the dimensions of the ship. Even the spelling of that ship, the name of that ship, they got it wrong in the film. We shouldn't blame them. So this was the level of knowledge about Chidambaram Pillai. So for 40 years, I collected material in bits and pieces. So before coming to the actual, the story of the collection of the material, I want to give you, I said it's a melodramatic story. I'll give you a few instances. First is, he swears to buy a ship. After he starts the shipping company, and the chartered ships that they get is scuttled by the Bora Muslim Shah Line Company. So they decide that they have to buy ships. So he sets out to Bombay to buy these 2 ships. When he leaves, his first son is seriously unwell. But despite that, he sets out. And when he goes, he says, I will not return until I am going to buy the ship. Now, this you would think is straight out of a novel. But this has been attested to by no less than Subramanya Bharati. Subramanya Bharati writes in the India that Chidambaram Pillai left Thoothukudi swearing that he will not come back until I buy a ship. So I believe Subramanya Bharati more than others. So the next thing is, shortly after, at that time, VOC's wife, Meenakshi, she's heavily pregnant. She's 9 months into her pregnancy. And when he leaves, he is told that, the pregnancy is going to be a difficult one. You should not go. But he says, I have to buy the ship. So he sets off. And on December 29, 1906, Chidambaram Pillai's second son, Arumugam, is born. At the same day, he is writing to Swadesamitran and Hindu and India that I have made progress in buying the ship. So he's not there at that time. Then, if this is not enough, as you know, he gets imprisoned. He is sentenced. He is sentenced to 2 life imprisonments, right? And he is sentenced to life imprisonments, not for many of the dastardly deeds that these days is becoming so common. Who can actually go to the Supreme Court and say that, we need more than 2 weeks to surrender? This man gets 2 life imprisonments. A man has only 1 life to live. He has 2 life imprisonments. And the logic for giving the 2 life imprisonments, the judge says 1 life imprisonment for your seditious speech. So I want to underline seditious speech because to this day, that particular case law, His Majesty King Emperor versus V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, is still a very important case law in sedition. So first life imprisonment is for sedition, and the second life imprisonment is for abetting the seditious speech of his fellow nationalist Subramanya Siva. So what is curious about this is that the man who delivers this seditious speech gets only 10 years. But Chidambaram Pillai, who abets it, gets 20 years. But obviously, the white judge was a very knowledgeable man. He knew who was the brain behind the whole thing. So he gave him 20 years for abetting a crime for which that quote-unquote national criminal got only 10 years. Then, if you go further and further, the great poem that Subramanya Bharati writes, Sondanatile parar kadimai seide tunjidom ini anjidom, that famous poem, that exchange between Chidambaram Pillai and Vausi on March 12, 1908, that is not a figment of Bharati's imagination. That conversation actually took place where Winch, the collector, tells Vausi that I will discharge you of all the charges against you. Only one demand he has. He says, you should leave Tuticorin. There is a heated exchange. Chidambaram Pillai says, yes, I will go. I will leave Tuticorin if you promise me that you will leave the shipping company alone. Well, the idea behind getting rid of Chidambaram Pillai was to crush the shipping company. So they wouldn't do it, so he goes to prison. So the shipping company that he launches, a phenomenal capital of 10 lakhs in those days. They are able to collect only 7 lakhs, of which 6 lakhs is raised by Chidambaram Pillai alone. And this is from a place and time when there was no capitalist class. From among traders, he raises this money. Then I want to add 2 more instances, also relevant to, the institution of Hindu. This man's generosity. So in 1920, Chidambaram Pillai and his friend Somasundara Bharati, they are giving a speech. They are going to give a talk at the Madras beach. The meeting is presided over by Rangasamy Iyengar of the Hindu. In making this introduction, Rangasamy Iyengar says, I am pleased to have Somasundara Bharati and VOC here because when 12 years ago the shipping company was launched, Somasundara Bharati assisted Chidambaram Pillai in launching the company. So these two people are sharing the stage, and I am privileged to preside over this meeting. Chidambaram Pillai objects to this. He says, it is not true that Somasundara Bharati assisted me in running the shipping company. He says, we worked together to run the shipping company. We acted as two eyes of that company, even though we know that it was Chidambaram Pillai's brainchild. And finally, what did it bring to Vausi? Vausi's life after 12 years, after when he came out in 1912, in appeal he was released after 5 years of rigorous imprisonment. Earlier in the day, Gopal Gandhi sir mentioned rigorous imprisonment. Rigorous imprisonment, every punishment listed in the jail manual was imposed on this man. The oil mill which should be pulled by a draft animal, he was made to pull that mill. So he was a broken man. He comes out, and in 2 years, what is his state? What is his financial state? 1915, Gandhi comes to Chennai, and Gandhi gives him an appointment at 6 in the morning, a personal interview. Chidambaram Pillai says, sorry sir, I cannot see you. Why I can't see you? It's because you have given me an appointment at 6 in the morning. In my present financial condition, the only mode of transport that I can afford is the public transport of tram car, and the first tram car starts only at 6:30, so I can't see you at 6. A man who bought 2 ships for the price of 4 lakh rupees in those days did not have half a rupee to hire a jatka or a horse cart to go to Sunkaramachettipuram. So this whole life is a great saga of mobilizing people. You know, this is not a individual achievement. He mobilizes the people. And in the shipping company, all people of all castes, all communities are there. There are Muslim merchants, Muslim directors, Christian directors. In terms of caste, not the traditional, just the traditional mercantile classes. There are Brahmins, Vellalars, Saiva Chettiars, Natukota Chettiars, Paravars, Nadars. Everybody is there. He is able to mobilize everybody. That is the most important aspect of his life. He refuses to go into the communal path that many of his fellow nationalists take, who are followers of Lokmanya Tilak. When Munjay and Kaparde, after 1920, take the path of the Hindu Mahasabha, he steadfastly refuses to take that path. He is always for mobilizing all the people. So this is the saga that I set out to write. And in this, don't get me wrong, Chidambaram Pillai is a towering figure, but there are so many other figures. Just want to mention 1 or 2 names. After his imprisonment in 1908, the company continues to work for 2 or 3 more years under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. There is one name called S.D. Krishna Iyengar, who gives up his practice and works for the company without any payment. And we don't know anything about this man. I have not been able to trace even a single picture of that man. Similarly, there is 2 brothers, one K.R. Gurusamy Iyer and K.R. Venkatachalapathy Iyer. The elder brother is completely against Vausi. He is snitching about him to the governor, carrying tales and ensuring that he is thrown out of the company. But at the same time, his younger brother, K.R. Venkatachalapathy Iyer, is somebody who gives up his practice to work for the shipping company. The way in which the British India Steam Navigation Company tried to crush this company is, all underhand methods were used to crush this company. This is how the state and the British India Steam Navigation Company joined together. It's a kind of crony capitalism which comes together to crush a nationalist enterprise. And this is a lesson for later times, but I'll come to that later. And quickly, I want to underline the role of the Chidambaram Pillai's wife, Meenakshi. It's one of the most moving aspects of that story. Meenakshi Ammal is 13 years old when she marries Chidambaram Pillai. She marries into a very big family, hoping to have a good and cushy life. By the time she is 18, she has had 2 children. By the time she is 18, her husband has been put in prison under charges which nobody is familiar with. First sedition case in South India in Tamil Nadu. And she goes from prison to prison, lives near her husband's prison house, works hard to get whatever privileges can be got for him. She runs a legal campaign. A 12-year-old, when she got married at the age of 12, what would have been her education? But if you look at the letters that she writes, it is so beautifully written. What wonderful Tamil. She's quoting from Tirukkural. And there is one point where she says, writing to a family member, she says, I have exhausted all resources. I have milked all my relatives dry. It is not possible for me to get any more loan from anybody else. All my jewels have been sold. All our ancestor property has been pledged. Now I am even ready to do manual work without losing my honor. என் மானம் கெடாத கூலி வேலை செய்யவும் நான் தயாராக இருக்கிறேன். She writes those words, Chidambaram Pillai went to prison. If he went to prison, he knew what he was in for when he started the company. But this young girl of 12 or 13, she didn't bargain for this. So this is, it's a very moving story. And final part, I hope I have 5-10 minutes. Why did this story not get written? This is the biggest challenge. Well, our society is completely apathetic to the maintenance of documents and records. But in the case of Chidambaram Pillai, it was made worse by 2 circumstances. As I said, a man with 1 life got 2 imprisonments. So in the court proceedings, all the defense witnesses who were called to swear, to provide testimony in defense of Chidambaram Pillai, all of them were asked one question. They said, did you take shares in the Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company? That was one question that the prosecution invariably asked to each of the defense witnesses. So basically, buying a share in the Swadeshi company was seen as a crime, and the moment he was given not 1 life imprisonment but 2 life imprisonments, this was unprecedented. Everybody, all his friends, most of his friends developed cold feet, and most of them destroyed their records. And it was made worse by the fact that in 1911, June, one of the officers, Robert Ashe, who was involved in crushing the company, the Swadeshi company in Tuticorin, he was assassinated in 1911. This is the only political assassination in South India. Immediately following the assassination, there was a witch hunt was launched. At that time, all of Chidambaram Pillai's associates, they destroyed whatever material they had with them. So later, when we went searching for it, there was nothing to be found. In all my research, I could find only 2 share certificates. After the publication of this book, a 3rd share certificate somebody has located. So this is the only 3 things. So, and you saw this picture, if we can have the picture of Galia. this picture was on the prospectus. Only one copy of the prospectus has survived or had survived, because I don't know where that prospectus now is, 40 years ago when I saw this. So all the documents have been lost. Chidambaram Pillai himself was a self-effacing man. He didn't go around boasting about his achievements. He wrote whatever he had to say, he wrote it in a verse autobiography, written in a very terse form. This was before independence. Otherwise, there was very little information. So one had to go through old newspapers. Subramanya Bharati's India, Swadeshi and the Hindu were three major sources. But once again, there was a problem. Because Subramanya Bharati was also involved in the Ash murder case, the crucial period of the journal India between 1907 and 1908, when the Swadeshi Company was at its peak, not a single issue from that period has survived. Similarly, for the entire 1907, Swadeshi paper has not survived. Hindu remains the only very important source which has survived. So we have to be thankful to Kasturanga Iyengar. But I went out of the way, and Maratha, Tilak's Maratha, and Aravinda Ghosh's Vande Matram, and Amrita Bazar Patrika of Motilal Ghosh, they reported these events. So that's where you have a wonderful vignette from Maratha, where there is a reception is hosted when the first ship arrives from Europe to Bombay. It's a beautiful description. And some private papers. See Vijayaraghavachari's papers. But here I want to add, historians, we always pride ourselves on unearthing new documents, right? That is what our USP is. So this is an interesting story, and that is where I would like to kind of wind up before coming to the actual writing of the book. Is if there are students here, I keep saying why you shouldn't follow Ram Guha's advice, don't read too much. You should read a lot, read widely. So in 1987, I first came across the word Lloyds. So immediately when I heard the word Lloyds, I said, if Lloyds insurance is there should be some material about the Swadeshi Company. No Google existed in those days, so my neighbor's uncle was a general manager of the United India Assurance Company. So I went to him and asked what Lloyds was. He said, Lloyds is the insurance company. I asked him, can you find out the address of this company? So he gave me the address. Address was in Fenchurch Street, London. So immediately wrote to Lloyds. Promptly they replied to me saying that you are confusing yourself with Lloyds Insurance and the Lloyds Register of Shipping. We are the Lloyds Register of Shipping, which I later found out was the world's oldest shipping classification society. So they said all the records are there, but these records cannot be photocopied. You have to come to London to look at these records. So I had to wait for 10 years to get the first opportunity to work in the British Library and the Guildhall Library where the records were there. That's the first time, Ram, I actually met you. Earlier I had seen you as the star who used to flit around at Tinmurti. So in 1996, I met you in the British Library. So the Lloyds Registry of Shipping is an amazing document. So where you could track the movement of each ship. So what I have done in the appendix is that I have tracked the movement of the ship, each ship, how many times it went from Tuticorin to Colombo and back. But there, I found that, Lloyds is not the only shipping classification society. There is another society called Bureau Veritas, and that is in Paris. So I waited for some more years, and when I got the opportunity to go to Paris, there in the Bureau Veritas office, I found records that confirmed this data, and it also gives you lots of detail about the ship itself. What is the ship? Who built it? When was it transferred? When did the ownership get transferred? What were the dimensions of the boilers? All these details are there. Now coming to the final part, probably I'll take 5 minutes, is now the biggest issue was that, the police records were there. I found the police records from the Tamil Nadu archives. Yeah, time's up. I'll take 2 minutes to finish this. So what I had was bits and pieces of information with no narrative. So it took me 40 years to think through this. The pandemic came as it gave me a sense of, reality. He said, we are all mortal. I am not the young man who first met Ram Guha in Tirmurti Library. I said, I have to write this. And to construct in this narrative based on bits and pieces of information was a very challenging task. But there was a point when the narrative took over, and there were points when one was, moved to tears. And if there are some wonderful passages in that book, it is not because I wrote them, they wrote it themselves. The life of Chidambaram Pillai is a saga of incredible proportions, and I am delighted that, I have been an instrument for the narration of that story, and I thank the numerous people, not only in Tamil Nadu, but all over the world, friends and their families who, this is not a funded project. I traveled to many places from the age of 17. I have stayed in the houses of friends where their families have, fed me, given me a roof. And all of them did it not because of me, but because of Chidambaram Pillai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chalapathy, for that fascinating, rich, and insightful, account of your very long journey with Chidambaram Pillai. I don't think we have time for questions. I'll just make a few concluding remarks. But this is the book, Swadeshi Steam, V.O. Chidambaram Pillai and the Battle Against the British Maritime Empire. Chalapathy will be signing books after this, so please go to the bookshop and ask him your questions then. I'll just make a few concluding comments about this remarkable book by this remarkable scholar. One is, first, a personal quarrel. I think you misunderstood me when I said don't read too much. What I really meant to say, I would have said it in the next sentence, which you did not quote, which is, don't read too many books by other historians, do your own research. And I think what he has read in the primary sources, in English and in Tamil, in archives around the world, and in different kinds of sources. He talked about shipping records, newspapers, intelligence reports, court records. It's staggering. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say, this is actually a very interesting book because it's a dual biography of a man and a company. It's all, the story of Chidambaram Pillai is heroic and moving and in the end, tragic. But so is the story of the company. Imagine if you think now, when we've been independent for 75 years, and we have secretive electoral bonds which allow our Swadeshi capitalists to get all the benefits they can from the government. Here is a man who took on the might of the British Empire and its legal, political, economic instruments. So the story of the company and the reconstruction of how the ships were bought, how they were sailed, what route, and why finally the battle failed, I think is truly moving and epic as well. So, the balance between writing about a person and the company. So it's not a biography of Chidambaram Pillai alone. It's also a biography of the Swadeshi shipping company. The last thing I'd say about Chalapathy is to, as I said, please go and buy this book. It's a fabulous work of scholarship. It's a magisterial work of social, political, cultural history. It illuminates imperialism, colonialism, the national movement, the process of law, the process of international maritime trade. And it's the product of a 40-year love affair, deep engagement with his subject. Now, there is a love affair Chalapathy started About a decade after Chidambaram Pillai. Is that correct? We won't say anymore. About a decade later? Periyar. Oh, but, okay. So you see, in a marriage, one should not be bigamous or polyamorous. But a historian is allowed to be polyamorous. So a historian and a biographer is allowed to be in love with more than one character. And there's a parallel love affair he's been carrying on, which will reach its culmination a few years from now. And it will also be about the individual and an institution. I wish you the best of luck in that subsequent journey.